Hi, I am Amir, and I'm going to talk about Farsi Twitter as a public sphere, our event-based analysis of discussion spaces, focusing on coexistence of democratic and non-democratic subspaces. This is a work in collaboration with Sisi and Steam Tehran, and Parham, Said, and Zahra are my collaborators. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about our event-based data collection, the topology that we use here, and the investigation of participation dynamics that we did, and the structure of the network and the relationship between content and structure in Farsi Twitter. I'm going to start with our research questions, then talk about our exploration of these discussion spaces, the data that we analyze, and at the end, our analysis and the results. So there's a lot of work that has been done on online social networks as public spaces and public spheres, especially about Twitter. And in particular, there are features that are known to help facilitate democratic deliberation in this media. For example, the fact that they remove these traditional barriers, they're widely accessible, and they connect people from different social groups and geographic locations. On the other hand, there are features that are known to contribute to the hegemonic faces of this media. For example, opinion manipulation, effects like echo chambers and spiral of silence, of online bullying and state surveillance, etc. We start our question from this conclusion by Miranda et al., where they conclude that Twitter is more emancipatory than traditional media in its structure, but more hegemonic in its content. We actually question this conclusion. We ask whether this holds across different topics of discussion, and we look at opinion manipulation and polarization in Farsi Twitter for a number of discussions to answer our questions. Why are we focusing on opinion manipulation and polarization? Well, we know that they have adverse impact on democratic deliberation, and for opinion manipulation, that is because, well, I don't have bot squads, but the governments do. And for polarization, that is because it kind of nullifies that feature that Twitter has for connecting different people. Farsi Twitter is very dynamic, and everything happens there in a relatively distinct social context, where transparency is scarce, state media is dominant, there is a state surveillance, or at least the fear of it, and everything can turn political very quickly and very easily. And there are a lot of shady activities, most certainly opinion manipulation, but also other stuff that are going on in Farsi Twitter. For example, this plot is one of our very first initial motivating observations. And you are seeing here the number of new users that joined Farsi Twitter from 2006 to 2018. And these peaks correspond to major political events in Iran. So we looked at these discussion spaces, and our exploration brought us to this topology for the topics of discussion. We categorize the topics of discussion in these three types. One are these topics that are political, and the discussion space turns divisive and polarized. We call them these divisive political discussions, here DPD. And there are these other types that they are political, but the discussion space is not divisive. These NPD discussions. And then the other type that are apolitical discussions. I should say that these apolitical discussions, they still cross social cleavages in Iran, but not across the political lines. And then we collected tweets by keywords for 12 different topics in these three groups. And I should also say that almost all of these topics are, or these discussions are discussions that happened after the event. They are not discussions that happened about an event that was expected to happen. And our opinion manipulation, for analyzing opinion manipulation, we use Botometer, and we get this complete automation probability cap from Botometer. And since Botometer is not a standalone method for bot detection, we also complement it with our manual annotation, and we end up grouping the users under these three types. Type A are those automated and human-assisted bots. Type B are bot-assisted humans, and what we refer to as campaigning accounts, which roughly corresponds to what is often referred to as trolls in the literature. And these Type C are genuine human users. You can say your cousin on Twitter. And to analyze this data, we look at the temporal pattern of participation of each of these groups of users. and then the friendship and retweet network and how well represented each of these types A, B, C of users are in each of the communities in these networks, and the content that is discussed in each community. If you look at the temporal participation pattern, we see that these divisive discussions have a distinct feature. So this plot is showing the number of tweets on each day by group A, this darker line. These are those that have higher concentration of bots, roughly speaking, among them. To group C, these brighter lines that are mostly genuine human users. And we see that the dynamics of tweet counts by each of these groups don't match at all in this divisive discussion. But for a political discussion, they pretty much match perfectly. I should say that these non-divisive political discussions serve more as a buffer zone for us. So this is not the focus of our analysis, actually. And I'm going to quickly explain these examples that I'm including here. For this Snap discussion is about an incident involving Snap. There's a ride-sharing app in Iran where the driver asked his passenger, his female passenger, to cover her hair. She refused to do so. There was a fight. It was taken to Instagram, Twitter, and eventually TV, and it became very political. And the political discussion here is what happened after Kobe Bryant passed away. So if you look at the Spearman correlation between the dynamics of tweet counts for each of these groups, we see that on the right, in this apolitical discussion, the correlation is almost a perfect correlation, and this is a result that it holds across different discussions. This is just an example, obviously. And on the left, for these divisive political discussions, we see that these dynamics for group A and C are almost uncorrelated. And if you look at the retweet network, we see that these divisive discussions are, unsurprisingly, quite polarized. So the community detection is here, it uses Louvain method, and we actually pick some accounts in each community manually, and we try to find some of these accounts that have known political affiliation, like news agencies or political activists, etc. And in these retweet networks, the communities that we find roughly corresponds to our intuition of different political groups in Iran. In a political discussion, on the other hand, the network is not polarized at all. I mean, well, communities are separated by virtue of the method, but it is clearly not polarized. We also did community detection on the friendship network, and here you are seeing the distribution of CAP, the complete automation probability for the users that we get from Botometer, in each community in the friendship networks. So on each of these plots, the first three violins from left are showing this distribution in three major communities in the friendship network, and the last one is for the entire network. So the discussion on the right here, this Golab-Adine discussion, is actually about the celebrity marriage. It's a divisive discussion, and the left is the same Snap discussion, that is a divisive discussion. On all of the discussions, we see actually there is a community that has there's a major community that has a relatively larger proportion of these users that have larger caps, but this is usually more substantial in divisive discussions. We also look at the content that is tweeted by users in each of these friendship communities. Notice that this is very directly relating the content to the pure structure of the network. So this community detection method on friendship network is purely structural, and we are looking at the word count of the tweets in the tweets that are tweeted by users in each of these communities. So the word cloud that you are seeing on row I and column J here is showing those words that are among the top 5% of the most frequent words in community I, but not among the top 10% in community J. This is for the divisive discussion about a Snap, and you see, for example, here there is this, if you look at the words that are used by community 4 and not the others, you see you get a sense of what this community are. So they are using this vocabulary that in this context is known to be the vocabulary used by those groups that are deemed to be the supporters of the regime. For example, this bad hijab, defamer, or value. On the other hand, this group C, the community C, community 3, we see that they are using words that in this context are the vocabulary of those dissident groups like mullah or terror or prisoner, etc. We don't see that for political discussions. Actually, for example, this global discussion that I showed the distribution of caps here for, this is basically empty, or there are a few words that they don't carry any meaningful information about the political affiliation of the groups, and that holds across all these apolitical discussions. So this brings us to this conclusion that Farsi Twitter indeed seems to be rather liberating media for apolitical discussions in Iran, but its structure for divisive political discussions actually reinforces the hegemony in its content. And that is our main conclusion. And obviously there is room for improvement. For example, more systematic topic detection or bot detection strategies can improve the results. And, well, that's it.